From the moment I saw it, the title intrigued me. I was doing research for today's Mother's Day sermon at church, and the title of one of the journals that I was reading was as follows: What I Wish My Pastor Would Say About Mothers. That's a pretty good title, and it actually, for me, did what titles are supposed to do. It not only intrigued me, but it motivated me and enticed me to read the rest of the article, which I did. What I wish my pastor would say about mothers. Let me share with you how that article begins. Mother's Day. It's sweet, it's happy, it's beautiful, and it's tricky. Some women are delighted to come to church on Mother's Day, but some women are hurting so deeply that they'll skip church altogether. How do you shower love on moms, but simultaneously show compassion to those who have been wounded? Matt Woodley is the editor of Christianity Today, also Preaching Today. And Matt, along with some wonderful female editors, decided that they would pursue this question, what I wish my pastor would say about mothers. So they asked 3 mothers, Christian moms committed to the church, some clergy, some laity, if they would give some answers to this what I wish my pastor would say about mothers question. And it intrigued me because what was shared and what was said is something that, as your pastor, I feel led to share with you this morning on this Mother's Day. So drawing from the insights of those 3 ladies, as well as the insights of both male and female individuals, let's consider this question together for just a moment. What I wish my pastor would say about mothers. First thing is, I wish my pastor would tell the church a little bit about how Mother's Day got started. Did you know that Mother's Day actually began in a church? A Philadelphia church in 1907, a lady by the name of Anna Jarvis, in conjunction and with the blessing of her pastor, planned and organized and directed a worship service that, first of all, gave honor and glory to God, but also was a way to honor her mother and all the mothers who were present. This idea caught on in other Philadelphia churches, and soon it spread through churches throughout our entire country. Anna Jarvis not only wanted to honor her mother for the wonderful home in which her mother had raised her, but she also wanted to honor her mother and other women, whether mothers or not, for the work they did outside the home to make the world a better place. So Anna Jarvis became the driving force of a campaign to have Mother's Day proclaimed as an official holiday in our nation. And as a result of her tireless work and her commitment to mothers and all women for what they did not only in the church but outside the church, she finally persuaded President Woodrow Wilson in 1914 to issue a presidential proclamation that there would be a Sunday in May that the nation would honor as Mother's Day. Shortly after that presidential proclamation, Congress of the United States passed legislation which said that from henceforth on, the second Sunday of May would be Mother's Day, a holiday in our country. Did you know that outside of Christmas and Easter, Mother's Day is the most celebrated holiday in the world? Sorry, dads, but outside of Christmas and Easter, Mother's Day is the most celebrated holiday in the world. It's not only celebrated in the United States, but also today, people in Canada and Australia are celebrating Mother's Day. This past Thursday, on May the 10th, our friends in Mexico celebrated Mother's Day there. 2 weeks from now, on May the 27th, people in France will celebrate Mother's Day. There are nations throughout the globe who celebrate a Mother's Day, and they do this through the sending of cards and the giving of gifts and the showering of praise. So I wanted you to know something about the origin of Mother's Day. I think it's significant that it originated because of the drive and because of the love of a Christian named Anna Jarvis, who wanted to honor not just her biological mother, but who wanted to honor all women for what they did both inside and outside the home. So that's one thing that as your pastor I want you to know a little bit about, the origin of Mother's Day. So it's good that you've come to church as part of your Mother's Day celebration. Second thing that as your pastor I want you to know about mothers is mothers are not perfect. They're not. They get pretty close, closer than I as a dad might get. I put my mom up there pretty high, but we're all human. And would everybody confess that sometimes families are a little bit messy? Sometimes real messy. But even in the context of that, mothers are often the channels through which God conveys nurture and love and encouragement to children in the church, in the home, in society. But no mother is perfect. Just aren't. In fact, mothers make mistakes. Billy Graham said that his mother, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about Billy Graham and his mother just a little bit later, that his mother, as godly as she was, made some mistakes. And he talked about a few times that he heard his mom and dad kind of get into it a little bit. You know, they disagreed, and you know, one of them might raise their voice. It was usually the mom. Oh, well, anyway, but they got it back together, you know, and they were committed, and they weren't exactly perfect, but they modeled a wonderful Christian marriage to their children. We've often said that really the best premarital counseling that anybody could ever receive was to be raised up in a wonderful Christian home. That's a pretty good deal. But the other thing about mothers being perfect, Billy Graham said, is that one time when he was pretty sick and he had a cough, his mother was supposed to give him some cough syrup, but instead she gave him a pretty huge dose of iodine. That is not a good thing. Have you ever read the little skull, this is poison on that? And it was only because of the fast action of a neighbor who was able to give something to counteract that Billy Graham said kind of saved his life. So his mom wasn't perfect. She was really, really good. But mothers aren't perfect. That's okay. God didn't expect you to be. Well, one of the ladies that I mentioned that was interviewed for this article, what I wish my pastor would say about mothers, was a lady by the name of, get this, Margot Starbuck. I immediately loved this woman. It was great. And Margot Starbuck said that in our country especially, we have elevated sometimes the role of mothers to such an extent that we think and act as if mothers should be perfect. And she said the roots of this took place in the 1940s and 1950s when our country needed some normalcy and some stability through and after World War II. And guess who gave it to us? Moms. Mothers did. They kind of kept the home together and kept the nation together and just really worked, as well as dads and men. But it became so idealized that we had this picture that mothers, if they were really to be mothers, had to be perfect. Does anybody here remember June Cleaver? Well, June, I guess she had to be perfect if she had a son like Beaver. But anyway, June was pictured on television as this perfect mother. She kept a spotless house. She was able to control those two rambunctious boys. She always had dinner on time. She always had that spotless house. She always did, community work out in the community. And she was usually pictured, or often pictured, sweeping the rugs with a bright, shiny new Hoover vacuum cleaner in her high heels dress and matching jewelry. You remember that? Well, I think June Cleaver was a good mom, but even June Cleaver wasn't perfect. There are no perfect moms. So here's the deal, moms and mom figures, give yourself a break. You're going to mess up sometimes. We dads mess up a lot of times. But give yourself a break. Because God doesn't call you to be a perfect parent. He calls you to be a present parent and the best parent that you can be. There's a series of commercials that's running on television right now, and they're quite intriguing. The commercials are really designed to encourage more people in our country to become foster parents. Because did you realize there are so many people, so many children who have no parents, no dad, no mom, no anybody. They're just in the foster care system. So these foster parents, and we have some wonderful foster moms and dads and parents in our church, they kind of step in. But in trying to let people know about the need for foster parents, all of these commercials basically say, just remember, you don't have to be perfect to be a good parent. And one of them goes something like this.
What to expect when you're expecting a teen?
Hey guys, today we're talking about how to wake up your teen, and this works literally every time.
Thousands of teens in foster care will look just the same.
It's pretty close to home sometimes, isn't it? But you don't have to be a perfect mom, a perfect dad, a perfect parent figure to children, teacher, mentor, coach, to be a good one. So moms especially, though you're really high up there on our list, give yourself a break. Just with God's help and the encouragement of other people, just be the best parent you can be. Well, I want to tell you a little bit about the origin of Mother's Day. I want to tell you, moms and mom figures, both inside and outside the home, you don't have to be perfect. And here's the third thing I really want to tell you. Maybe the most challenging thing I want to tell you. I want you to be sensitive to women, especially on Mother's Day, who are not moms. Many of them would like to be moms. Many of them have chosen to be single. Many of them are biological moms or want to be, and that doesn't work out. But just be sensitive to the fact that every time we have a Mother's Day celebration, there are women who need to be thought of and prayed for and celebrated for who they are. So, same lady, Margot Starbuck, says that, and she was a clergy person, that anytime she tried to plan a worship service, she always tried to be mindful of everybody in the pews around her, whatever the service was. And she wanted to always be sensitive to women on Mother's Day who weren't moms for whatever reason. Because, see, there's always a little bit of sadness on Mother's Day. You don't have children, or you lost a mother, or God forbid you lost a child. So just be sensitive of everybody on Mother's Day. Don't get me wrong, celebrate mothers. Gosh, please do that. Honor them, celebrate them, applaud them. But just be sensitive to everyone. Well, I had a dermatologist appointment this week. And I go to a dermatologist regularly. I've had 5 basal cell carcinomas removed. It's because I worked on the farm, didn't wear a hat, didn't wear a shirt, got burnt to the crisp at the beginning of the spring, and had a great tan throughout the summer. Guess what? That catches up with you after a while. It has caught up with me, but I go to a dermatologist on a regular basis. So this past week, I go to the dermatologist for a regular checkup, and I get into the exam room after I've kind of been checked in, and the nurse does all the vitals and stuff and says, I'm going to leave, the doctor will be in shortly, and here's the gown I want you to put on. Ha! You know those gowns with not any back in them, and so you're in there by yourself, and you're trying to put that on, and I never can get that drawstring thing tied up quite right, so, okay, I'm just sitting there, but I've been around long enough to know that anytime that I might have to wait, I take sermon material with me. I really do, because you know what? Whether I've got a dermatology appointment or not, Sunday comes every week, and I got to have something to say to you people, all right? So I'm in there, and in that gown, kind of exposed more than I wanted to be, and I know my doctor's going to come in soon, but I'm reading. And guess what I'm reading? I'm reading this article, what people want their pastor to say about mothers. And so my dermatologist comes in, and he sees me reading that. He knows I'm a preacher, and I put it up there on the shelf. And he said, I'm sorry I'm late. He said, well, you're not very late. I said, look, I always have some sermon material here, and I'm preparing the sermon I'm going to preach on Mother's Day. Mother's Day, he said. Bobby said, the maddest I ever got at a preacher was on Mother's Day. He hadn't gotten his scalpel out yet, but golly, come on, And he said, let me tell you what happened. He said, my wife and I went to this Mother's Day service at church, and it was a day to honor mothers, and I love my mother. We all need to honor mothers. But the preacher got up and said something like this. In order for a woman to find her ultimate fulfillment in life, she has to get married, she has to have children, and she has to raise them in a family. What? And he even went on to say it in another way. He said, a woman cannot possibly fulfill her ultimate intent in life unless she gets married, has children, and raises a family. Had he ever heard of Mother Teresa or Lottie Moon? Bob, he said, I was so mad. I was so angry. I almost walked the aisle, and it was not to rededicate my life. And then he said, look, Bob, I know the preacher didn't mean that. I know that preacher. He loves his mom. He loves all people. He's one of the kindest individuals I know. No way in the world would he intentionally harm anybody, but Bob, he wasn't sensitive. And in what he said and in the way he said it, he wounded a lot of people in church. Because, you see, Bob, my wife and I were there, and we were never able to have children. We've had 4 miscarriages. And I was so mad. The dermatology appointment went well. I was okay. But the lesson from the dermatologist is something I will never forget. even as we honor our moms, and we should always do that, be sensitive to everyone around you. And so women, ladies of the church, whether you are a mother or not, biological mom or not, foster mother or not, never a mother or not, I want you to know that ultimately you find fulfillment in God's sight by being the person that He calls you to be, and that you, whoever you are loved by God, the heavenly parent, as if you were the only one He had to love. Know that. Celebrate moms. Be sensitive to everyone. Well, there's a fourth lesson, and this really comes from a son. It comes from Billy Graham. And in his book, which is appropriately titled his autobiography, Just As I Am, there are various places in the book where he talks about some lessons that he learned from his mother. And he said, here are the lessons. First of all, she raised us in a Christian home, and she taught us to pray every day. But even beyond that, he said, I knew that my mother prayed for me every day. When I was young, when I was a teenager, when I was out doing crusades all over the world, I knew that wherever I was, whatever was happening, good, bad, or indifferent, my mom was praying for me. Made a difference in my life, he said. And then he said, my mom also taught me that there is dignity in hard work. She taught me that laziness can be evil, almost be a sin. And the day I was born, he said, she picked beans that morning and had me at 4 o'clock that afternoon. I am not advocating that to anybody, but she taught him the value of hard work. She taught me the value of reading widely. Early on, my mother and my father, who did not have the greatest formal education, instilled in me and all of my siblings that we needed to read. And he said, and I read the Bible, but I read Hardy Boys Mysteries. I couldn't wait. I read the Tarzan novels. I couldn't wait till they came. Billy Graham is one of the most widely read people that's ever been around. Continue to read and use your mind as well as your heart, his parents taught him. And then he also says, and this is kind of poignant, he said, look, my mom not only taught me how to live, and boy did she teach me how to live, but she also taught me how to die. How to get ready to make transition from this world to the world beyond. She died several years before Dr. Graham died, but it was her example and her attitude and the way she accomplished her transition that helped him as he made his own transition from here to heaven. Then he said, my mother was wonderful. And you, he said, not just to moms, but to all women, you can be wonderful too. You are wonderful. And you can begin by knowing Christ as your Savior. Wow. Well, there's one other thing that this preacher, your preacher, needs to say to you this morning, and it's simply this, that life is often simultaneously joyous and sorrowful almost at the same time. And I think it would be most appropriate on Mother's Day if you heard just a little bit of a sermon preached from a female mother who's a preacher. Her name is Caroline Lewis. She is an associate professor of preaching at the Lutheran Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota. And She has an interesting take on what happened to her one Mother's Day.
On this Sunday after Mother's Day, I am reminded of Mother's Day a couple of years ago. My oldest son wakes up, comes into the kitchen where I am unloading the dishwasher because what else would a mother do on Mother's Day? Yet it was a day like no other because every morning in our house, when he came down from his bedroom, he would check to see how much he had grown. And of course he expected to be growing overnight. And every morning I would humor him. I'd shrink a little and say, Sid, you've totally grown. You're almost as tall as I am. How can that happen? He so desperately wanted to be taller than I, and he couldn't stand it when I wore heels. But that morning, and I'll never forget it. I never will. He actually was taller. He really was. There was no more feigning, there was no evading, there was no more pretending, there was no more saying, you are so close, Sig. He really was taller. And it's a lot easier to shrink than it is to rise on your tippy toes so as to avoid and avert the truth. And it was Mother's Day, and I wanted him to be taller, and the 12-year-old he wanted to be, and I know that it's okay that his move into maturity necessitated being measured by the height of his mother. And every single morning, I felt him slipping away. Every single morning was that crazy morning, is that crazy morning, that crazy moment, that crisis moment, almost an excruciating moment of joy and grief. When you want them to grow and go, and yet every single part of you, every single place inside of you, every single pore of your being wants them to stay, and wants them to want you, and wants them to need you. And in that moment for me was a flashback to when I first became a mother, 9 weeks too early. He was 3 pounds, 10 ounces, this baby of mine, my first child, way before any of the birth classes I ever had. I was not prepared. Wasn't even on that chapter of the book yet. And in the midst of the joy of having my first child was an early labor, a premature birth, a significant stay in the NICU, months of therapy, 1,200 a month shots to keep him from getting the common cold. Is this what Jesus meant? That you could realize joy and heartache 12 years apart? That you could know joy and pain in one event? That you could experience joy and sadness in one single second? Yes, I think this is what Jesus meant. I think this is what Jesus had in mind. I trust that Jesus really knew that to be human is to know the abundance of joy and the pain of letting go in the very same second. Yet what joy is to know that Jesus lived exactly what this means.
And Jesus does know what it means to be human. He does know what it's like to experience incredible joy and sorrow and grief, sometimes in the same moment. But he has promised that throughout our journey of joy and sorrow, and even when they intertwine, that he will be with us, that he understands us, and that he is the type of parent who will guide us through this life and beyond. These are just a few things that your pastor wanted to share with you this morning. And as I have preached them to you, hopefully I have listened and preached them to myself. So now, I hope you really will receive the blessing of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, who go before you, follow after you, watch over you, who go with you through simultaneous joy and sorrow, and who at the last will lead you safely home.